I just did it that way for ease. And for the F one, I followed it like it was an F7, because going back to what I was talking about before, over hitting that 7th note, I can finally use an E flat over, that's what that is, an E flat over the F chord to make it stand out a little bit. Okay, and then I repeated the whole thing. So slowly, I'm going to play that whole pattern for you. It looks like this. 2, 3, 4. And so on. That's basically how it goes. Now I'm going to take that chord progression, the C, E minor, A minor, G, F, and I'm just going to solo over it using some variations, breaking into some of those arpeggios like I was doing before, but basically sticking to the theme and the melodic content of it and soloing around it and improvising. And what I'm going to do is, first time around, I'm going to have the chord progression playing along, first 2 times around or so, and then I'm going to stop the chord progression and I'm going to keep soloing. And you should hear the chord progression through what I'm playing, because I'm so much consciously following that chord progression with the notes I choose. 2, 3, 4. That's something that you want to be able to do. So you don't need a backing guitar all the time to solo and practice over progressions. The only thing that matters is the progression that you're playing over as you're soloing. I can't stress the importance of that, because that's the whole point of soloing, is you're soloing over something and you're an ensemble in a band or whatever, playing music. Basically in arpeggios and making arpeggios, to follow these chords, like in the progression, you know, and to be able to arpeggiate any chord you hear, you just got to know the names of the notes that are in the chord. So you take the first note of the chord or the root, and the third, the major or minor third, and the fifth. And say you're taking an A major chord for an example, then you'd have A is the root, and C sharp is the major third, and E is the fifth. So any place that you can find those 3 notes in any order, in any position, is your A major arpeggio. I mean, it can look like anything. So without, you know, taking the most obvious ones and simple ones, let's just, you know, come up with a couple off the top of my head and practice those. And let's find an A here. Okay, those are the 3 notes right there. A, C sharp, and E. Let's make it a little bit more interesting using only those notes and get something that we can practice as a repeating pattern. Let's try this other arpeggio here. Let's try a C major. And C major has the notes C, E, and G in it. So any kind of configuration in and out, up or down of those notes is C major. So let's try it like this. I'm finding that I'd like to have an easier or more interesting way to come down on that arpeggio. So what I'm going to do is come down with a relative chord. You know, I'm going to go up a C major chord, and I'm going to come back down with the relative chord, the relative minor chord, which in this case would be A minor, because C going a step and a half down and changing it to minor makes A minor. So let's take this C and go back down with an A minor arpeggio that looks like this. It's kind of an interesting way to make something that repeats. You know, the whole point is when you practice an exercise that it repeats, so you can like gauge your speed on it and your cleanliness of it by a metronome or something like that. So it's got to repeat, and it's got to repeat somewhat evenly so you can figure out where the beat's supposed to be in it. So just any kind of thing with an even number is basically easy to start out with. So that's a good one to do right there. Up C major, back down A minor, and so on. A way to practice that with a metronome is evenly, and the whole point of metronome playing is to develop your evenness. So that's the thing that you want to keep in mind. You already know what the notes are. You're going to play them correctly. Now let's make it really even. So what you want to do is get a metronome speed that's slow enough that you can play it clean and evenly. So let's get sort of a metronome sound going here, and I'm going to play this lick that I just played along to it. Okay, so basically what you want to do is get it at a level that's comfortable for you and move it up very gradually. If it seems that you're playing it too fast for yourself, then you should bring it down and don't try to speed it up too quickly. And do this with everything that you know that repeats. Any sequence of notes that you can repeat, you should repeat it with the metronome and get your technique together with that. I think there's a big difference between a player's technique and his creativity. I think technique is like kind of like a bank. You have all this technique in your bank, and like when it's time to be creative, you draw from that. But you shouldn't use technique as a substitute for creativity. You just have to have this arsenal of chops, you know, and then you can break them out when you need to. But that's what the metronome is for, and that's what repeating riffs and arpeggios and patterns or whatever, that's to develop your technique. An important point is like I make up these arpeggios kind of like just because I happen to know where the notes in each chord is, you know. So if I was to come up with something off the top of my head, I know I want C major, so I'm going to hit C, E, and G in any kind of configuration. So let me rattle off a few and see if I can break them down for you. Basically, I went up sort of like this. I started on a low E, like. And to make it easy on myself to get into this position, I went like this, from here to a note out of the arpeggio, D. Sometimes you have to break out a little bit to make the thing smooth and flowing, but if you break out smoothly, it's cool. And it kind of adds to the motion. So I went probably something like this. Now you could, you know, variate that anyway. I mean, anywhere. You could just change it anywhere. When you're up here, so what I did there was picking for me is a very touchy subject because I basically don't really have a clue to what the hell I'm doing. I don't have a set